Have you ever wondered why a flower is shaped like a flower and a cat is shaped like a cat? How does DNA store the information of what a cat, a flower, or a human being should look like? Who programmed the genetic codes to know the exact location of each organ in the embryo? Where are the memories of the instincts and habits of the different species stored? How could we attribute all this to DNA, since the genetic code only coordinates the synthesis of proteins, determining the sequence of amino acids in the construction of macromolecules, that is, in the DNA are the building materials of the house. But how is the house built? How to explain the process of cell differentiation in the development of an embryo? A cluster of equal cells that are organized in a complex way into different and specific organs with millimeter precision in the right places. The way the protein distributes inside cells, the cells in the tissues in the organs, and the organs in the organisms seem to be coordinated by some kind of intelligence, a software program with memory that is intertwined with the organism. As a kind of field, it is as if the archetype of a form existed saved in a memory that can be accessed in the cloud, just like on the internet. These fields are changeable and evolve according to external interactions, storing the information. Fields are perfect and adapted, explaining, for example, how the survival of microorganisms that biologically alter themselves to survive in a given environment occurs. Bacteria when they become resistant to antibiotics, and animal species that learn new survival habits. These improvements are stored in this cloud, becoming available to the entire species. An example of this is the experiment of the 100th monkey. Japanese scientists observed monkeys surviving on islands in Japan and noted that all the monkeys were eating sweet potatoes full of dirt. But one day, a family monkey washed the potato in seawater and ate it. Seeing that the potato had become tastier, she continued the behavior. Soon, the other monkeys on the island began to wash the potatoes in the sea as well. Up to the point, we could say that the other monkeys learned to wash the potatoes by imitating what they saw. However, the monkeys on other islands, which had no contact, also began to wash the potatoes to it. The scientists did not understand how this information reached the monkeys on the other islands. To explain this, Hubbard Sheldrake named it morphic resonance, the manner in which new information is accessed by the entire species, including animals that were born later, as this data is saved in the cloud, which is the morphogenetic field of the species. This explains why an animal, even when separated from its mother and other offspring, exhibits original behavioral characteristics of its species without ever having interacted with them. A cat instinctively scratches, smells, and buries its fishes. Ducks bury bones and bark. The bowerbird constructs a woven nest of twigs and decorates it with flowers to attract a female. Among other behavioral phenomena that we observe in nature, which are patterns of intrinsic habits of different species, other scientific evidence indicating that existence of a universal field with memory capable of storing information would be the discovery of the Higgs boson by physicist Peter Higgs in 2013 to explain why fundamental particles had a mass. For example, the mass of the electron does not depend on its quantum field, but rather on the Higgs field, since all quantum fields have zero energy and only the Higgs field has non-zero energy, causing resistance to the movement of the particles. Working like water in a swimming pool, the swimmer is the particle. She can swim fast, but the resistance that the water causes limits her speed. It is as if all the fundamental particles were immersed in a universal pool that creates their mass, offering resistance to their movements, involving them in a kind of layers of energy according to their speed. We can consider the Higgs field as the element of water, making hook to the other scientific discovery made by French immunologist Jacques Benveniste, the memory of water. While observing the reaction of white blood cells to allergenic agents, his assistant made an error in calculating the dilution of the agent, adding a large amount of water, causing the molecules of the allergen to disappear. However, even so, the solution provoked a reaction from the white blood cells. To confirm this phenomenon, Benveniste tested dilutions in increasingly larger amounts of water, which continued to provoke reactions in the cells. This led to the conclusion that water is capable of recording and storing the information of molecules. We can conclude that there exists a universal field responsible for the mass of fundamental particles, which behaves like water. It is capable of storing information like memory. This can be associated with the theory of morphic fields, considering the law of mentalism that I presented in the video about the cybernetic laws. We know that the universe is mental, having its existence and substance in the mind of the all. Therefore, the original archetype of a cat, its body structure, characteristics, instincts, and behaviors already exist in consciousness as a saved memory that programs both the DNA to structure matter in the form of the cat and also programs the energy that behaves and expresses itself like a cat. The existence of morphogenetic fields explain the phenomenon of regeneration of organisms to their original form when destroyed, as seen in some reptiles and the species of flatworms, which, when cut into pieces, each piece reconstructs itself into a complete organism. The sacred geometry, an ancient science recorded in Egyptian scriptures and constructions, indicates that everything in the universe is made of geometric patterns. It is possible to observe sacred geometry in nature, such as the matrix of all shapes. The Masons refer to God as the great architect, having as their main symbol the letter G for geometry, within a compass and a square. Representing this concept, the science complements the theory of morphic fields, this being an organizer giving shape to matter through sacred geometry, following the specific geometric configuration of such fields, whether they are individual or collective. An example of a collective morphic field would be the family tree or family constellation. Individuals from the same family do not only inherit similar physical forms, but also the traditions, beliefs, habits, and typical behaviors of the same. This explains, for instance, why descendants of alcoholic individuals tend to have the same inclination towards alcoholism, among other hereditary problems. This field influences family members to follow patterns and behaviors similar to those of their parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents. Whether good or bad, it is possible to free oneself from habits and patterns conditioned by the family morphic field. We will understand this further on. Other examples of collective morphic fields would be societies, their cultures, and religions. For Western society, which is based on the concepts of creationism and the classical worldview, it is difficult to understand the concepts of Eastern philosophies and religions based on the expansion of consciousness through meditations, mantras, and multifaceted deities, as they are entirely divergent morphic fields. Other examples would be entities such as Yahweh, the devil, the gods of mythologies, Hindu gods, etc., which became real within a morphic field nourished by the minds of the people who worship them, being formed in the collective psyche. For as we will see later, it is possible to create morphic fields from scratch. Chemists noted that when creating in the laboratory a crystal that never existed, the initial processes of crystallization are more difficult. However, when repeatedly performed, it is observed that subsequent crystallizations become increasingly faster, easier, and more precise, as if their information were stored in the memory of the universe, creating the morphic field of this new crystal. we can understand how and why mental programming techniques and visualizations of archetypes to become what we truly desire works. For if there are forms saved as a memory in the consciousness of the universe, a program configured with the original information of an archetype, a state of consciousness, a specific form, ideals, professions, skills, behaviors, etc., we can access and install this program in our mind, since the entire universe is mental. You may have heard of power animals or the use of animal archetypes to acquire characteristics like the eagle's determination, the owl's wisdom, the tiger courage, the wolf's loyalty, and so on. These archetypes are information that can truly be downloaded and configured in our minds through visualization, meditation, and reflection upon them, incorporating their morphic fields. Mental reprogramming can detach us from morphogenetic fields, familial fields, and collective morphic fields that condition us. However, for this, we must empty ourselves of everything we have learned and observed throughout life. As to download new programs, we need an empty memory. Therefore, mental reprogramming is not an easy process. The use of thought observation and meditation is to first empty the mind. This is a lengthy process that can take years and requires a deep desire for self-knowledge and questioning of consciousness and the reality that surrounds us. And in this empty consciousness, to install the desired information through archetypes, affirmations, binaural frequencies, and subliminal messages that communicate with the unconscious. Just like programming language, biokinesis is a pseudoscience that suggests biological transformation by the power of thought. There is no scientific proof of its effects, but its aspirants believe they can change physical characteristics such as eye and hair color, body shape, health, and even longevity of the body through the kinetic energy generated by the concentration of thought on the desired characteristic and in the storage of this information in the subconscious through audios with specific frequencies, comments, and statements that alter the DNA molecules. Considering that the universe is mental and all forms are stored in the consciousness of the whole, and we being mental beings existing in this consciousness can access the various mental forms that exist, it is possible to validate the effectiveness of this pseudoscience as the shapes exist in the memory of the universe and can be accessed and installed in our mind, programming ourselves to behave in such a way. To get out of this state of identification, it is necessary to let go of everything we believe we are, have, and do in the society. Detachment from how others see us, from our titles and attributions, from our concepts about reality, God, and creation. In order for the mind to become clear as a crystal, an empty space, a virgin memory, it can be programmed in any way we want. It is possible to access the morphic fields of great personalities that have already existed, such as Cleopatra, Einstein, and configure them in our mind to achieve related goals because their information and memories are saved in the morphic field. This explains why there are so many reports of reincarnations of Cleopatra, as it is possible that people have merely accessed her memories through the morphic field of her consciousness. Understanding the functionality of this universe is our destiny and responsibility, as we are forms through which the source becomes aware of itself. Our morphic fields can be self-programmed to the extent that we acquire information and evolve. Thus we can transform into better avatars, better groups, and better societies through morphic fields of meanings. And to evolve, we must question reality and seek the source from which we came. What is the purpose of all this? Why am I in this body? Why am I thinking? What is that voice in my head? René Descartes said, I think, therefore I am, and that the only certainty we have. When we understand that everything that exists is mental, and we are in the mind, that material objects, such as a ball, and mental objects, such as the thinking of a ball, are both objects in the consciousness, and that form are relative within the mind, we begin to look for the source. Consciousness is the source. Forms are transitory, relative, and illusory. A chair is a configuration of particles, atoms, and molecules in a pattern that we interpret as a chair.